Let me paint you a picture. You're at school in the computer lab working on a PowerPoint presentation about Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, and naturally you start to get bored. So you check to see if the teacher is looking and you discreetly open a web browser to get your fix of gaming. Newgrounds, cool math games. There's a ton of these sites that I frequented during my state allotted computer time on the Blue Bubble Mac, and honestly I could do a whole video just on those browser games in general, but today I wanted to talk about a more specific style of game that's a bit harder to recreate using something like Flash Player: first-person shooters. First-person games have been my absolute favorite style of game from the first time I played one. I still remember the first time my friend booted up Halo 2 and let me run around Zanzibar. It was just magical, but to be fair, I had never used an Xbox controller for this style of game, so it probably went a little something more like... Wait, how do I look down? Wait, how do I look down? But still, I was immediately hooked, and since then, FPS games have been the primary genre of game that I enjoy. However, since most first-person shooter games are, as their name suggests, shooters, almost all of them were rated M and inaccessible to me as a young kid. Enter the weird online world of browser FPS games. The number one version of this type of game that I remember playing the most during high school was a Counter-Strike clone called Critical Strike that I would play during my free periods at the end of the day during my junior and senior year. It was really just a basic copy of the original Counter-Strike, but the fact that it could run on computers that the school bought us just to run Desmos without downloading any additional software was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, this game doesn't have official PC servers anymore. I'm fairly certain it still exists on mobile in some capacity, but I was able to find an offline version of the exact game that I played in high school that at least supports bots, so here is Critical Strike. The only way I was actually able to play this game was a kind of sketchy Dropbox link that I found on r/deadgames, but the folder that you end up downloading contains a range of Critical Strike versions from 1.76 to 2.70. And after going through all of them, I was able to figure out that 2.7 was the version that I played in high school just because I recognized this really specific AK texture that none of the other versions have. For the game itself, as I said, it's a pretty basic clone of Counter-Strike, complete with a huge list of actual CS maps and 3 basic game modes of traditional bomb planting CS, team deathmatch, and zombie survival, which I weirdly do not remember being in the game as a kid. I exclusively played TDM and multiplayer, but it's in every version, so clearly that was just a me problem. But if you've played the original CS, you've pretty much played this game, so I have kind of nothing else to add other than how specifically nostalgic these weapons and maps are to me personally, and the fact that this game features Matt Forte on the Bears, which very specifically dates this game to coming out between 2008 and 2015. Kind of fun, silly detail I noticed. But the reason that we're even here, that you're even watching this video, and why I decided to make it was because I was recently going through a move and had my PC boxed up for a while and wasn't able to play the normal games that I wanted to play. So in my boredom, I tried to find in-browser FPS games that could kind of satisfy the COD itch I was having that could still run on my laptop, and in doing so, I was instantly hit with this massive wave of nostalgia that just made me run to start scripting this video. Outside of the video, I actually ended up playing some of these for a week or so that I didn't have my PC set up, and was shocked at how decent most of them were. A lot of these are just really fun and really weird, and something that I don't really see anyone else on YouTube talking about outside of some top 10 lists, which are decent videos, but I haven't seen anyone kind of just go over the experience of playing these games, so that's what I want to try to talk about. Because clearly, even though there are games like Fortnite which are free to play and run on most systems, there's still some reason that these games exist and there's live servers and people are putting time in them. They clearly still have some place in the gaming ecosystem, even if they're not really talked about. So for that reason alone, it's just kind of fascinating to me, and I wanted to get into it. There's 3 rules for a game to qualify on this list. Number 1, no downloads. This list is just for games that you can actually play in your browser without downloading anything. It just runs in the browser. Number 2, no accounts. Nothing that requires you to sign up or make an account or put in an email, because ideally, in theory, I would want all of these games to be able to be played on a school computer. And finally, no battle royales. This video is just for arena shooters and games similar to Critical Strike. There are battle royale games that are very similar to these games, but I'm not including them here just because battle royales are a much more recent genre of game in my mind and don't really fit the vibe of this video, and I don't really know them as well or like them as much. So with that out of the way, let's go. Alright, starting off just to keep it kind of consistent, we got another Counter-Strike clone, baby. This game is super obviously just a mobile game, from the massive UI elements to the Fortnite-esque cosmetics like frying pans and horse heads that you can see immediately. This game actually still has some active servers on it, but the only active regions were Europe with 33 players and India with a grand total of 2 players, who I have to assume were just harmoniously sniping at each other until the end of time. So not wanting to third wheel the Indian server, I joined into Europe and was thankfully met with a server browser. You will see in a moment why that is important. So I clicked on the first server I saw and I spawned in. The first match that we got was a melee-only TDM game that appeared to be populated with actual people rather than bots. After being an asshole and trying to spawn camp for a little bit, I started beefing with this one guy who was just ominously standing behind a crate. Initially, I tried doing the sacred FPS mating dance of crouching at one another, which I assumed meant that we were chill. I was wrong. You can't just break the sacred crouch rule, man. Now I gotta hunt you down. Oh, and I almost forgot, but all of the voice lines in this game were done by a French dude, so they all sound really, really funny. The next server that I joined was some type of gun game mode where I learned 2 things very quickly. Number 1, this game has terrible latency, and number 2, the only real way to get kills is by hitting people in the head, because the multiplier on headshots is so insanely high and body shots just don't do as much damage. I did end up going on this fun little spree with the shotgun and started to get a bit more of a feel for how to line up heads, but the game ended just before I could truly pop off. So I joined back in, but this time we had pistols only, which I found to be the most fun mode by a long shot because it was basically the SWAT from Halo, and here I truly got to flex all 15 years of my FPS experience. I do have to say, once I got the hang of hitting these headshots on the game, it was so satisfying because you could just instantly decapitate anyone. But I did wind up getting a little tired of this game at a point because, goddamn, you might have thought I was at a Pokemon card convention, how much trading was going on, but it's just because the latency is so bad that it's almost impossible not to shoot someone at the same time as them shooting you. So most of your kills end up being you shooting at someone and then half a second later dying to that same person. But if you want something to kind of just randomly kill time on some afternoon, why not play this? I don't know. Up next we got Jamir. Nope, that's not just someone's name, that is the name of this weird sci-fi game that was not initially part of this video at all, but I came across it while getting footage for another game, and I just could not resist putting it in the video. It's arguably not a first-person shooter and arguably not a multiplayer game, but it's so silly that I just have to talk about it. Let's get into it. As soon as you start the game, you get jump scared by a spaceman running directly into your face before you're asked to sign away the rights to your firstborn child, and then are presented with a pachinko machine. What? I could not for the life of me figure out how to actually drop the ball in the machine, so I just backed out and tried to find a match, only to see that there were only 5 other people on the entirety of this game, but they were spread across different servers, so none of the games that they were in could actually start. Like, look at this. There's 3 out of 6 players in the 6-player mode, 1 out of 12 in the 12-player, and 2 out of 24 in the 24 mode. If everyone just hopped into the 6-player mode, we could actually get a game going, but I guess you guys just want to sit in menus forever. Couldn't be me. So I decided to boot up just the free roam mode, curious what any of this could mean. Once you pick a mode, you get to choose between free-for-all, TDM, and whether you want the game to be in first or third person. I saw none of this, so I ended up going into TDM third person. The moment that you start up the actual game, you get met by this insane music that sounds like it just got ripped out of the most recent Doom. Even though all you're doing is running around and picking up items, like I actually turned off the music at one point and just went through the same actions of what I was doing, and it's so boring. But just because this music is playing, it feels kind of cool. After finding the exit to this weird base that I spawned in, I found one of these little speeder bikes that you can ride around and shoot off of, which is by far the sickest part of the game. These things move so much faster than they have any right to move just based on the scale of the map, but they're so fun to use. And at this point, I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. The game said to collect resources, but What resources? Where? From who? How? What does that mean? I hopped off the bike only to start getting attacked by these aliens at the game called Kojan, and this gave me an opportunity to start playing with the combat a little bit. You have an assault rifle and a double jump, which feels decent enough, but then I remember that this game was listed when I looked up first-person games, so why wasn't it in first person? That's when I backed out, noticed the menu, and actually set the game properly. So I went back, got the speeder again, and I have to say, riding it in first person is so much more fun because you can actually aim separately from where you're driving, which gives kind of a cool, like, you can do drive-bys on alien. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. I like that part. I then came across this little hut with a gun inside of it that I learned that you could use to actually launch yourself up into the air. Like, clearly this game has a lot of good ideas and a lot of cool shit going on, but unless they add bots or the 6 players in this game can figure out how to all get in the same lobby, I think this one's kind of just dead in the water, unfortunately. Up next is actually one of the games that I played a decent amount during the PC-less times, and that is Venge.io. This game and the next little chunk of games I'm going to be talking about are all IO games, which means something. I don't know. I need to turn to Research Grant for this one. Okay, Research Grant here is same person. IO is just a TLD or top level domain like .net or .com. IO specifically got popular within gaming and tech spaces, but originally it only referred to the country code for the British Indian Ocean, apparently. But it's kind of interesting seeing what types of games decide to use the IO domain, because it seems like a lot of these IO games have come in to sort of fill the gap left by the death of Flash games. I don't know, it's kind of cool watching the internet evolve, but in some ways stay the same. But whether or not IO games succeed in regards to filling the Flash void is kind of yet to be seen, but at least for now I'd say they scratch a very similar itch. Anyway, Venge.io is one of the first games that comes up when you simply Google browser FPS games. So this is one that I'd played before, as I said at the start of the script. You gotta read through these, man. Right upon starting up this game, you immediately see why I mentioned it was so nice to have a direct server browser in the last game. Instead of letting you manually host or join servers, you just have to hit this Fortnite-style Play Now button that links you to a random match that, more often than not, leaves you feeling more alone than the summer in middle school that I locked myself in my room and did nothing but binge Fairy Tail and Powerpuff Girls Z in the dark. That's real, I did. That happened. The first game that I got to was just a 1v1 against someone who I assumed was a real player, because even though the lobby eventually did fill up, it emptied just as fast as it filled once I started pushing people's shit in. But then the star of this arc joined my game, Javner 3. Don't ask me why that was their name. The names are randomly generated. I have no idea. It's not my fault. For the life of me, I could not tell if this was a bot or an actual person, because I looked around online and found no evidence that this game actually uses bots, and I feel like if they did, I wouldn't have gotten to all the empty servers that I did. And the way that this player moved was just weirdly human, and they seemed to react to me in a way that seemed more like an unskilled player than a bot. So to kind of figure out if they were human, but also potentially to help them out, I started to give them some lessons, first starting with them aiming at a moving target. Yeah, they need some help. And immediately after the first lesson, they swapped to a shotgun, presumably because I killed them with a shotgun, which just further makes me think this has to be a real person. So I started sparring with them again so they could get more of a sense for the controls. Unfortunately, in the middle of our lesson, another player joined in who was actually worth a shit, so I had to hop around and take care of them before school could continue. But after legitimately one death, this other player decided they didn't want my smoke, and so I was able to go back to training my disciple. Next, I hopped around to try to give him some aim practice that they desperately needed at a moving target, where they actually started to copy the movement that I was doing. I, at this point, am fully convinced this is a person. Unfortunately, immediately after realizing that this is a person, I killed them by mistake and then proceeded to hit the wrong button and do a Fortnite dance on top of their corpse, which apparently was not the words of encouragement that they were hoping to hear from their professor, so the second that the match ended, they left. Alright, and that arc was all fun and good and interesting, but I feel like I didn't show off the game at all during any of that, so I went back into one last match where I was actually paired with some decently skilled people and got to play the game properly. I haven't personally played the Fortnite FPS mode, but I have to assume that this game is somewhat similar to it just because the aesthetic is so similar. But after going 18 kills without my first death, it was all but confirmed to me that the majority of people playing this game are just children on mobile devices, which made me realize that what I was effectively doing was just walking up to an elementary school and challenging children to fistfights, so I decided to hop off the game and let the kids have their fun. When I first made this list, I would have suggested this game as a decent one, but since I've played through more of these, I would actually say there's some better stuff out there that is just as accessible, if not more accessible, so not the best, not the worst. It's there. It's there. It's a solid 5 out of 10. You're there. You showed up. Good job. This next game is one that shockingly still has somewhat of an active community around it, even though this game's golden era has long since left us. This game is one that still pretty consistently came up in online discussions when I was researching this type of games, and it even has a release on Steam. And they don't just let you put any garbage on Steam, right? But since this game is relatively old and has had somewhat of a competitive history of players actually taking it seriously, joining now is an absolute nightmare. Thankfully, this game has a server finder, but it also just gives you the option to just click the middle of the screen and join a random game. This game has multiple game modes like trade servers and zombies, but for this video I just stuck with the classic free-for-all deathmatch. And in the first server that I logged into, I was greeted by a level 188 player who smoked me instantly using a mechanic that is really important to this game, where you effectively just see us go bunny hop around the map, gaining infinite momentum. The problem for new players is that if you aren't using this method to gain speed, you're just complete sitting duck waiting to get picked off by whatever animal eats ducks. Often I would get killed before I could even move out of my spawn point, which made this game honestly pretty miserable to play most of the time. I was hoping at this point it was just a particular lobby that I had got into that was bad, so I backed out and waited a few minutes before joining another game. But even though I thought I found another server with totally different people, I was quickly stopped in my tracks by another player, this time at level 94, flying around the map like a coked up Sonic, who immediately rolled me up and smoked me like Jacob Jones making an amber leaf cigarette. After a few matches, I was able to get better at the bee hopping myself, but I was still pretty ass at it. I ended up getting some lucky headshot kills on these guys, which started to make it feel a little bit more fair, and I have to say, the movement, once you get the hang of it, feels kind of good. Honestly, if we're just looking at the game itself, it seems pretty fun. It ran really well on my PC, the graphics are kind of a basic Minecraft-looking voxel thing. It looks outdated now, but works pretty well for what it is. Oh, and if you were wondering why I was only using the AK through this whole section, it's because there are other classes, but you need to register for an account to unlock them, which by the rules of this video, I wasn't allowed to do. So AK gameplay is what you're gonna get. Like I said, towards the end, I started to kind of get the hang of the game in this last round, so I could totally see someone spending time getting better at this game and learning the movement and having that be a satisfying and rewarding experience, but in its current state as it stands, I really can't suggest this game to any new players. And as it seems, even for dedicated long-term players, this game has made a lot of changes that are kind of anti-competitive, so not sure who this is appealing to anymore other than the strange level 188s who sunk too much time to stop playing it. Not a bad game, just its era is over and I think it's time to stop. Sticking with the voxel game theme, up next we got Core, or Cower.io. I had so much fun with this one that I ended up playing it for almost half an hour. Let's just get right into it. This game shares the matchmaking system that the last game had, where you're able to manually search for servers, but you also have the option to just click play now and get into a match faster. Instantly, I found this game to be way more fun than Krunker, even though it's super obviously based on it, and that's just because a lot of the players playing this game were closer to my skill level, and most importantly, you can't gain momentum by jumping, so it feels normal. I did get killed a few times by high-level players in this game, but every time that happened, it felt fair and it felt like I had an actual chance to fight back. That is how a multiplayer game should be. After running around for a while and actually doing a lot better than I thought I was gonna do, I came across this beam of fire spraying out from behind a piece of wood, which turned out to be Walter White from the American classic Breaking Bad. I just love goofy moments like this. Moments like this are why I play arcade shooters. It's just, you can't script that. Eventually I realized that there was a variety of classes that I could choose from with different weapons and skins, so I swapped from the agent over to a brawler who uses a pump action shotgun that has 2 shots. I found only minimal success with this class at getting a few kills, but for the most part getting outgunned by people who could just shoot faster and further than me, so I decided to test out the gunner class who reps a P90. Instantly got smoked. Okay, different class. I continued just swapping through the other classes for a bit, trying out the Rocketeer, going back to the P90, trying the shotgun, but then I found it. The Hitman. Once I picked this class, the game, it was over. Up front, I just want to say this, I do not want to claim that I'm good at video games. No one has ever said that, and I'm not going to be the first. And I would not really call myself a fan of Counter-Strike either. However, I put in 189 hours into CSGO in high school, and the vast majority of that time was spent either using or saving up to buy one gun, that being the AWP. And during that same time, I played a good amount of Overwatch, peaking somewhere in Diamond. If we're being honest, I was Platinum and I got carried by my friends, but I can say I was in Diamond because that's what my elo said. And guess what character I was consistently the best at when I played that? Widowmaker. Both of these examples are just to make the point to say that I really like using snipers in PC games. So once the AWP in this game touched my hands, all in all, I'd say at this point, this game is just a better version of Krunker. I know I might make some people mad, I might make some children mad by saying that, but you probably shouldn't be on this video anyways. Now pivoting to something completely different, not a Counter-Strike inspired game, but a Battlefield inspired one, with kind of a fun, blocky Roblox art style. The first match that I got into was Gun Game, but the match ended before I could even start, so I just waited for the next round to start, and this one was so much fun. Here is the actual Battlefield experience you'd be expecting. The first map that I got on has you playing inside a house, but you're scaled down to toy soldier size, which I just thought was really cute. And the first thing I went for, the most fun thing in any of these games, was a vehicle. Immediately I ran over to this tank and just started going off. The vehicle controls smooth and is about what you expect. You could scope in to shoot this rocket, which I thought was pretty fun. Eventually someone tried to jump up on the back of my tank, but I accidentally backed into them and ran them over. My bad. And after watching my teammate do the exact same thing, I drove around and cleared out some more enemies. At this point, I was effectively just spawn camping these guys, which I felt kind of bad about, but at the same time, I didn't feel that bad because I knew if anyone really wanted to stop me, they could just get in a tank themselves or get that helicopter up there and bomb me, so this destruction was really on them, if anything. I tried running someone over in their spawn, but he just jumped on the top of my tank and started playing hopscotch until I started getting annihilated by a helicopter and got set back on foot. Now here I actually got to explore more of the map, being able to climb on top of some of these cabinets and other furniture. I feel like a lot of the charm and enjoyment that I got out of this game was just the fact that I played it on this map, and I will admit that, but it's a really goddamn cool map. After running around for a little bit, I started getting shot at by the same helicopter that blew up my tank, so I pulled out the rocket launcher, which apparently is a guided missile that you can control in first person, so I drunk drove it directly into the side of the helicopter. Beautiful. After that, I just kept running around, picking up some individual kills, kind of testing out the gunplay, which I felt was pretty smooth for one of these games. This is a good game. This game does feature some smaller, more COD-esque modes with smaller maps, but I really think that that's the weakest part of this game by far, because the larger scale Battlefield stuff is so much more fun and honestly so much more unique to this game. So if you do decide to check this one out, I would recommend targeting one of those big vehicle maps, because that's really fun. I think the rest of the game is maybe not the best and you could just play Roblox, but at least for the Battlefield type gameplay, I actually do think this is really fun. Okay, wait, and the last thing that I need to put in here is I got a backstab on someone after doing some CSGO surfing. Okay, next game. This next game was one of the last ones that I came across in my search, but I decided I just had to include it because the characters and design was so cute. After naming myself after none other than composer Steve Reich, I decided to hop into a game where I found myself stuck in water under a boat. Once I made my way out, I found I was in a map that was actually quite beautiful. The bright colors and smooth textures were a really welcome break from a lot of these more drab looking games that I had been playing, which is to say, this game is actually really beautiful. This map has a lot of areas that you can climb up and over and take cover, like these barns. There's weapon pickups scattered across the map, and the bullet trails and impacts are really satisfying and kind of shocked me in how high quality they were for a game like this. I noticed in the top right corner of the screen it said 3 players, which I took to mean that there were 3 players in the server, but after wandering around for a few minutes I realized I think that just means that there are 3 players on the entire game right now, and the odds of all of us ending up in the same random server was next to none, so I did have have to move on. But this one stuck out to me, and I decided to keep it in the video just because I really wish I could have played it with other people. It seems cute. I don't know. If anyone wants to get a server going for this game, let me know. It seems fun. And the final IO game that I'm going to cover, Evio or Evio or AVO? I don't know. This game is definitely one of the more unique ones I'm going to talk about in this video. It really has no direct clone or influence. I feel like it's loosely inspired by something like Splitgate or Destiny, and it feels a lot like this old, really niche game that I used to play on Steam called Toxic, but really it's its own thing. You get abilities like teleportation and a variety of different grenade types, as well as enhanced movement like a double jump, which was all just really fun to mess with in tandem. Unfortunately, this game's servers are almost entirely filled with bots, but what I do appreciate is they're at least very transparent about that fact, making the actual players appear in green while all of the bots appear in red. That's a nice touch. I think every game should do that. So the lobby that I got into consisted of a bunch of bots, another guest player, and my arch nemesis for this arc, Ruhig. The first match that I got into, I ran around easily clearing out the bots and the other guest player, but every single time I ran into Ruhig, I was no match for him. So I made it my one mission the next round just to take out this one guy. Like, I ignored every other bot and player on the map and just sought out this one dude. It was also at this time I figured out that you could sprint, which was kind of a huge part of the game because you could build momentum with that into your jump. Not sure how I didn't figure that out in the first round. I eventually found Ruhig up on top of this structure at the center of the map, but yet again he bested me. I went up to re-chow, and at this point I actually did get the jump on him. I was able to drop his health just below half, but he quickly took cover just out of my sight, teleported behind me, swapped to a sniper rifle, and absolutely humiliated my ass like I was his little brother and he had just run up and down the field before scoring a touchdown on me in Madden. This was personal now. So back up the metaphorical and I suppose literal mountain I went to challenge my nemesis, and finally the tides were changing. Yeah, fuck. Okay. Okay, one more try, you got it. Back up the mountain, but boom, where is he? My trickster nemesis was elsewhere. Ah, behind me! I turned on his ass faster than Judas, and finally, I had my win. That is all I cared about. Up next, we got Skillwarz. This game and all of the rest of the games that I'm going to be talking about in this video are all hosted on this site called Crazy Games, which I had never heard of before making this video, but it was the one that I was frequenting the most during my week of playing browser games, just because it's the very first thing that comes up when you Google browser games now. But I don't really know where this site came from. Apparently it popped up in 2014, but didn't really start growing in popularity until 2019, and then the pandemic helped it grow a lot. But it seems like now it is the #1 site for playing in-browser games, but I actually thought it was pretty good. Most of the games on here are just blatant knockoffs or ports of mobile games, but all of the games run really well, the UI is really smooth, and I also kind of give the site props for continuing some of the legacy built up by those classic Flash game sites. Like, cool math games still exist, but this is just offering a kind of more modern feeling alternative to it. Shout out Crazy Games. Alright, now moving to our first crazy game, let's get into Skillwarz. So immediately upon launching into the game, you're greeted with this CSGO looking menu, and like the past games, I just hopped into quick play and joined the first server I could. As soon as I spawned in, I got so excited because this game is the closest thing to COD that we've played so far, which is a game series that I have put so many hours in, so I just immediately went to work on this game. You might have thought I had IBS in an elementary school the way I was shitting on these kids. I think it goes without saying this game is by far my favorite on this list. The movement in this game feels amazing. You're able to slide and jump very similar to COD. There's actual humans in most of the lobbies. The guns feel good to use, and you get a variety of choices of weapons. And my favorite thing, there's no damage fall off or bullet drop at all. So it's just you point at something and shoot. It is so beautiful. This game to me is exactly what an arcadey shooter should be. It's hitting my heart in a very specific place. I love this game. I eventually found this bounce pad in the middle of the map and tried to hit some trick shots off of it, which took multiple attempts, but I did eventually get a couple of. There we go. So I just started going back to this jump pad and trying to stay on it as long as I could, which admittedly made me a really easy target to shoot at, but it made for some really fun shots, which I think is just the nature of what this type of game should be. This game is silly. This game is goofy. I love it so much. I want to say more about it and have more to go over, but really the entire time I played this game, I was just sniping people on this one map, so It was really fun, but I have nothing else to add other than that. Go play this game. Go play this game. This one's fun. Okay, now moving even closer to actual Call of Duty, this game is a pretty obvious copy of Black Ops 4 or COD Online, which was Chinese Call of Duty. It mostly reminds me of Chinese Call of Duty. The moment that you launch this game, you are met with 15,000 menus and ads and pop-ups, and there's local singles in your area, and you want a free iPhone, and it's honestly overwhelming, and I kinda just wanted to close the game immediately, but moving past that, this one is super obviously a mobile game, and quite obviously an active one, because every moment of menus in this game is littered with microtransactions and loot boxes and battle passes and daily rewards. But once you click through all of the very many screens to get there, you finally get to this screen where you can actually join into matches. Immediately, the look of this game reminded me of Black Ops 4 with like the operator screens and just the general map aesthetic that they're using. And this was only further confirmed when I joined the game and saw these health bars above people's heads, so they were very obviously taking inspiration from that game in particular. Unfortunately, this is another game that's just littered with bots, but pretends to pass them off as actual players. The first match that I got into was entirely bot, so it didn't take very long for me to build up my kill streaks, which are identical to those in COD. Kind of fun how similar it is. You also get these operator abilities at the bottom of the screen, my class that I apparently chose being a flamethrower, which I used to end the match pretty quickly. So I went back into requeue and hoped that I would actually get some real people this time. The next match I got into was gun game, starting with my bread and butter, some snipers. But again, I blew through everyone with pretty much no resistance or even shots really being shot back at me. So it became really apparent that there were no other players on this game and I was just fighting bots, which I thought was pretty disappointing. Like, I don't mind that these games use bots. Obviously, they can't fill every single lobby and they still want to let you play the game. I just wish they were a bit more transparent about who is and isn't an actual player, so I don't have to just sit here and wonder every time I join a lobby. The next lobby that I joined into was again filled with bots, but this time I got into a match of search and destroy, so I actually ended up sticking with it. I quickly realized that this map is just a reskin of Dust 2, which is funny because I'm realizing now how many of these games have Dust 2 in it. That map is everywhere. I completely fucked up the first round because the bomb got planted pretty far away from me, but there's no indicator telling you where it is until you're 5 feet away from it, so as soon as I got to it, it blew up. But all the other rounds went about how you would expect with one real player and a ton of bots. This game's okay, but the fact that every enemy you fight walks in a straight line and then stands still without aiming at you at all kind of ruins any real fun to be had. But the last match that I joined into, I finally got paired with at least one actual human named Cheesy Goblin. And thank God for the Cheese Gob, because I was about to give up on this game entirely. As soon as I ran into the Gob, he proceeded to kick my ass, but I was not gonna let that go, because the next time I ran into Mr. Cheeseman, I was ready, dodging grenades, jumping behind corners, but I got his ass. And so the rest of the game was pretty much just a duel between Cheese Goblin and I, with some bots getting scattered in the crossfire. I'd imagine this game is decent on phones, I would say. On PC, there is no reason to play this, but I could see some kid, like, on the bus playing this game on their phone. It makes sense for that specific purpose. Otherwise, I don't see why this game is even a thing. But by the time I was finished with this next game, I was just wishing that I was playing with bots again. This one is a Battlefield clone, and honestly a fairly competent one. The graphics are decent for what was likely developed with just a phone in mind. You have custom loadouts with guns that I believe you can unlock for free, but I didn't play long enough to afford any of them. And you also get kill streaks, which I thought was kind of a nice touch. And while I only played on one map, I have to assume there's more, I was still really impressed by it with the scale of it, but just the fact that the game was able to handle such a large map with so many players running around it, honestly it was pretty impressive. The game is cross-platform for both mobile and PC, but I think the majority of the player base is on mobile, much like a lot of the games on this list, honestly. However, as I mentioned, unlike the last game, this one doesn't use bots and was able to actually fill a pretty large server with real players, which I was able to find pretty easily because of the inclusion of a server browser, thank God. But I was pretty quickly reminded of one of the major reasons that I stopped playing these types of games in the first place. But before I get into that, I want to show off a little bit of gameplay because that topic's gonna completely derail this game. So I do want to talk about the game a little bit. I honestly had a pretty good time just trading kills back and forth with some of the enemies. Like, this game is just generally kind of pretty looking and the gunplay feels nice. But now for the reason that I have been blurring out the chat for this whole section of the video, and the main takeaway that I had with this game Yeah, so in the first and only lobby that I got into, I was greeted with your normal share of slurs that you would see in any first-person shooter game chat, and the fact that I even have a tolerance for that at any level is kind of absurd, but so goes playing video games online, that's what it is. However, this game in particular is absolutely fucking rancid when it comes to hate speech and bigotry. I can only assume that it's because the majority of the player base is 13-year-old edgelords, not only because all of the chats that I saw in this game were filled with just blatant racism, but because I got to experience one of these 13-year-old edgelords firsthand. Meet Moan Harder. Now, that's not his name by choice, but it's the name that his brother put on his account, and I guess he doesn't know how to change it. He later said that this was the same brother who was teaching him all those fun words he was using earlier, and then proceeded to ask us what they meant, which was then answered by someone else, likely only a year older than him, who explained that it, quote, used to be a swear, but is now a passive term or identifier for a group of people. At this point, I could not resist the urge to say something, so I told them both to look up the meanings of words before they say them online, and generally just not to trust this dude's older brother, which was received about as well as you might expect, before someone reminded me of something really important. This dude is 12. Realizing my efforts were probably just in vain, I decided to close the game and just move on to the next one, but for some reason this was still really bothering me, and I didn't want to move on to the next game. Like, I knew I couldn't get this kid to actually understand why what he was doing wasn't cool, but there's a part of me that really wanted to try to help him, maybe in some way, so I joined back in to see if he was still there, and he was making jokes Kanye would be a fan of and asking people who Diddy is. Okay, never mind, it's fine. Okay, that whole experience left a very bad taste in my mouth, so maybe I need something to get that taste out. Something like some eggs. You see what I did? This game is objectively the best game on this list, and if you take nothing else away from this video, it should just be this game is awesome. From the initial loading screen, you get to see this game's unique and charming visual style. It's also smooth and these low poly textures and graphics that feel almost Fortnite, but what that means for your game performance is that every single match I got into, I was sitting at a comfortable 160 frames. Like, it dropped to 140, maybe a little bit, which for one of these games is just amazing. As you can see in the center of the screen, your character and all the people you're fighting in this game are eggs. This game is just quirky and silly in all of the right ways, and I love it. This was the game that I personally spent by far the most time playing during that week I've been talking about where I was playing browser games for real, because I would just keep finding myself getting stuck and saying, okay, one more life, I'll do one more life, and then I would just get drawn back in to press the respawn button over and over again. But what that means is the gameplay that you're seeing here is not me playing it for the first time like it was for some of these other games, but maybe the fourth or fifth time. But anyway, I decided to get into a lobby of Capture the Spatula because that was the mode that I had the most fun playing with in the past, and that was still true today. I picked my tried and true 2-barrel shotgun named the Scrambler. Yes, all of the guns have really cute egg-related names and puns. This was actually a pretty good lobby for me because I was able to get some easy kills right off the bat, not before almost killing myself with a grenade, but I started doing somewhat decent. To be fair, this shotgun is, in my opinion, the best gun in the game, but still, I was popping off a little, so much so that someone actually told me to swap off the shotgun, which is fine by me because I also happen to have a daily challenge, which was to use the P90. Sorry, the Whipper. See, there's dailies here that exist, but they aren't in your face. It's perfect. It gives you a goal to chase if you want a little extra objective, but it's super easy to ignore if you just want to get into the game. I'm talking to you, Hazmob, and now that I'm swapping guns, I feel like now is as good a time as any to show off all of the other guns. As I said, the Whipper is the game's SMG, which shoots faster than all of the other guns, but burns ammo really quickly and has a slightly worse range than the AK-47, which is the game's assault rifle. When I wasn't using the shotgun, I was using one of these two automatic guns. There's also two snipers, which are the Crack Shot, which is a single-shot bolt-action sniper that I found honestly really hard to get the hang of because the scope takes a second to settle before you can actually shoot straight, presumably to stop you from quickscoping. You fucking assholes. But once I got better at waiting and leading my shots with this gun, it was actually pretty fun. The other sniper is called the Free Ranger, and it's the same as the Crack Shot with more ammo, a faster fire rate, and slightly lower damage. This is totally random, but it looks like the neon green transparent version of the Nerf Long Strike that I had as a kid, which I spray painted camo like a fucking moron because I wanted it to look more realistic as a kid, which made sense then, but now I just wish it was transparent green because that was sick anyways. Completely lost the point. There's also a rocket launcher called the RPEGG, which I assume was only added to the game as a joke because I could only get kills on people who were AFK and not moving. And finally, there is the Tryhard, a 3-round burst gun that apparently was accurately named because I got accused of using an aimbot for this kill while using it. This comment made me sign into the site so I could comment back, but once you do that, it resets your lobby, so sadly I couldn't defend myself, and I never got to find Ethereal again. What an accurate name, actually. But I ended up staying in this next match that I joined into for almost half an hour because this game is just so fun. But I'm glad I did because it led to some fun moments, like me getting this guy to jump off a tower to chase me, where I died, but still I wrote that down as a fun moment because it was just goofy. I got some kills with the crack shot, and then I also somehow got this kill by throwing a grenade directly up into the air and then having it come down. This silly egg game is just so perfectly geared to having those fun little multiplayer interactions and moments that make games like this so memorable and fun. Moments like these are honestly the thing that made me want to make this video in the first place. This game is the best on this list because it knows exactly what it is and it doesn't try to be anything else. This isn't a serious shooter, this isn't CS, this isn't COD, there's no monetization or mobile version, it's just a silly little game to waste time with some friends. And as far as I can tell, there aren't any bots in this game, but you can still really easily find populated servers, which means this game is alive and thriving still. And in terms of community, this game is the polar opposite of the last one, with active players and chatters who actually tend to be pretty friendly to one another. One of the very first chat interactions that I saw in this game when I was playing it and not even recording it was someone explaining to another person what a femboy was, and it was genuinely the most respectful and honest conversation I've seen about gender on a video game in my life. Like, it was weird. I was very thrown off by it, but it was really cute. I don't know, because it was just an older person genuinely asking someone, like, what is a femboy? Why do you feel like you identify with feminine stuff? And it was just so, the back and forth was just so respectful. I'm like, the world is healing. There are small pockets of the internet that are very wholesome and healing, and this just happens to be one of those. So I really wanted to specifically highlight that. That's a weird sentence. So I really wanted to specifically highlight that. That's a hard thing to say. What the fuck? I knew I was going to put this game at the end of the video from the moment I planned it out, just because it is the silliest. But as I worked through the list and got through more games, I got even more happy that I decided to place this game here, because it really encompasses what made the original game I was talking about, Critical Strike, so fun and memorable to me. It really brings some warmth to my heart to imagine that there's kids in a middle school or high school somewhere playing this game in a computer lab just like I did, making memories that they can then make retrospective videos about in 10 years. Thanks for watching.